Oh, okay, my friends, I am going to take this as an assault on my hero, Immanuel Velikovsky. Here's this, just came out February 3rd, 2023. Why are flood myths so common in stories from our ancient cultures around the world? And then it says, well, what can we learn about all this stuff? And then it goes on about this guy, Claude Levi-Strauss, about being that he's looking into the structural study of myth, and there's astounding similarity between myths collected in widely different regions. That is Immanuel Velikovsky's research. This guy was a usurper, and they never once mentioned Velikovsky in here that I can find. The world's oldest flood myth stories and archaeology and and goes on and on, how they were so fabulous at figuring all these things out. Not one mention of Velikovsky in here. My hero, completely overlooked, and this is when he posted his stuff. This is this guy who has been given the early credit. He was the earliest one. No, he wasn't. His books go 1955, 62, 52, 60, 58, 66, 55. Velikovsky published Worlds in Collision in 1950 and was destroyed by academia. Then these guys weaseled their way in. That's just totally an assault on Velikovsky in my mind. You see this? 1950. He published Worlds in Collision, 1950. Now, he's talking about comparative mythology. And what is comparative mythology? Is the comparison of myths from different cultures in an attempt to identify shared themes and characteristics. Comparative mythology has served as a variety of academic purposes, and that's what he did. He used his comparative and his ancient literary sources from everywhere, Old Testament, from everybody on earth that had any scholarly work that talked about these ancient disasters. And it all happened 3,500 years ago. There was a great flood. And I have now pretty much corroborated everything he said. Everything I have found is basically on the surface of the earth, and it's flat as a pancake on one side, and I have found all of the things that he spoke of. And they term him as a pseudoscientist, and they always point to him. Look, he's cited as a canonical example of pseudoscience. He's been used as an example of the demarcation problem. You can't talk about religious things that were written in the ancient Hebrew texts, in the ancient Bible, in the ancient Sumerian, in the ancient, every one of them, 100% of them across the board. But they don't want to hear that. That's off the table. If it has anything to do with any possibility of God, forget about that. He founded the Hebrew University, actually. You know, he was a Jewish scholar. He was a friend of Einstein's, too. Einstein was Jewish, and they were friends, and they were associates. And Einstein actually died agreeing with Velikovsky. That's what I was told. He died with his book open on his bed. That's how they found it. That's what I heard. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember reading. All right, this was a tragedy. 1950, he published this book, and Macmillan was the publisher, but they were also a big academic publisher. And it said the book, Velikovsky most criticized and controversial, was an instant New York Times bestseller, topping the charts for 11 weeks while being in the top 10 for 27 straight weeks. It was on the top, it's number one on the New York Times bestsellers list for 11 weeks in a row straight. And it was being criticized the whole time. And despite the popularity, overwhelming rejection of this thesis by the scientific community, that's academics, forced the publisher, who was Macmillan, to stop publishing the book and to transfer the book to Doubleday within 2 months. All right, so they said, no more, you got to stop. Or they weren't going to buy any more books from them. That's how they shut them down. Now, Doubleday took it on because it didn't have any academic interest. They couldn't really hurt them. All right, and they said that is very, very unusual for anybody to take on another book. And the only reason he took it on because they could sell it no problem. But because if they stayed away from, they'd have to just disassociate themselves from the bullies in academia, and that's how it still is today. You have to say what they say, do what they tell you to do, or don't come around. You see this? This is academia for you right here. The Harvard Crimson. Some should not be heard. Talking about Velikovsky. A close encounter of the third kind, direct contact with an alien. Well, not exactly, but Immanuel Velikovsky's idea of the cataclysm history of the planet forms about as otherworldly a scientific hypothesis as was ever aired at a meeting of American Association Advancement of Science. So they just made a big joke out of him. This was in 1974. All right, it says, still, it was the AAAS invitation that brought Velikovsky into its midst in February '74, although the AASP's goal was to dispute his challenge to the conventional view of science. Sagan, they sicked on him. Basically, that's what happened. They sicked Carl Sagan on him. All right, Sagan missed everything. And he's attacking Velikovsky. Listen to this, what he said. Against Velikovsky, he said, where Velikovsky is original, he is very likely wrong. Where he is right, the idea has been preempted by earlier workers. There are also a large number of cases where he is neither right nor original. Then he goes on to say, Sagan was rewritten and expanded his attacks on Velikovsky for publication in a new book. Scientists confront Velikovsky. It was just absolute nonsense. He had no clue what he was talking about. Velikovsky did the work. Sagan just made a joke out of Velikovsky with no scientific. I mean, he was just totally incompetent the way he approached what Velikovsky said. He made up all kinds of things about him. It was very, very unprofessional.